All right. Well, I said weeks ago when we started Advent, the Advent season, that it was going to be a little bit like sailing through a tsunami, the tsunami of the Christmas season or the holiday season, and to maintain Advent, which is a kind of quiet waiting spirit, to maintain that in surrounded by what goes on in this country. It's tough. It's tough. But uh, I think I had people, just writing me emails and stuff saying, I really appreciate rediscovering Advent because, you know, one guy said, I never heard the word before. Can you tell me more? I said, well, you can Google it. But so fourth Sunday of Advent, you light the last candle on the wreath. We have a thing with the four candles. Last week was a pink candle. This week, the other 3 weeks, it's purple. Little ritual that we like to do here. So the screensaver I had up was, we're going back to the sense that we're on a what kind of seed journey here, and I like to think of it like, you know, Magellan or Columbus, these guys who just set off the long view. Magellan was set off to go around the world. They were trying to say, well, maybe Columbus is right. Let's see if we can. If I head west, maybe I can come back east. If maybe it is wrong. They didn't really know. Uh, Long view. Columbus assumed that if he sailed west, he would bump into India, and which is why when he bumped into the Bahamas and then Haiti, he saw the natives there and they called them Los Indios. He said they thought they were in India. Well, it was wrong. He didn't know what India looked like, but uh, so we got from the day one that word Indians is a misnomer. So now they call the area around Haiti West Indies. Yeah, but really, it's one of my brother Columbus's mistakes there. But they had to have a long view. So imagine just sailing and not really, because they really believed at that time, they believed that there was like an edge to the world, that the world was flat and there was an edge, and then you could go beyond the edge, you'd fall into abyss and all that. So it took a lot of courage. And if you read the diaries of um, the Dominican who was with Columbus, it was beyond edgy. It was almost at mutiny because they hadn't seen land for a long time. And so it's sort of the same spirit we have to have in sailing as a contemplative. You're on a voyage, and in Advent especially, you're trying to train in a kind of abiding. Uh, Abiding is what I is a better word than waiting, because call waiting. Nobody likes to wait in line. We're a quickaholic culture now. Dial up is too slow. We're really, let's have it, and that's not the contemplative kind of way. Contemplative way is to learn how to abide and wait patiently and let it come to you. You cannot make it happen. So this idea of a voyage, and that's why I like the little. I actually would say it a little bit different, but that's the only one I could find. It says you can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. And that's it. When you're on a sea voyage, like if you're on a schooner or something that's using wind power, you can't control the wind, but you can trim the sails, and you have to really try to catch it. And so there's no such thing as like a straight going across the ocean, or a straight thing if you're a sailor. You go with the wind, and so it's more like this. And really, that's more like contemplation too. It's more like this voyage into inner space, interstellar space. Is It's not a straight line, and you have to have a lot of patience. Yeah. See, but you can trim the sails, and we'll get back to that at the end. But a poem that came out yesterday. I had actually another presentation planned, but then, you know, can't control the wind. And this poem came up. So uh, we'll start with that. And it was, you know, it just came to me that two kind of masters of the long view. Uh, Joe said in one of the last comments a week ago that, you know, there's a long game here. Well, there's a long view that goes along with the long game. The Iroquois Confederation there, they saw these northern New York now, but these tribes up there, they had a long view. And if you really study anthropologists who study history, they really pretty much say now that the founding fathers got the idea of the United States, a confederation, from the Iroquois. The idea that you could actually band a bunch of guys together. But the Iroquois had this thing about 7 generations. They said, before you do something, think about what it would mean 7 generations down the line. Long view. If we have any problem in this world now, short view, immediate gain. You know, build a business, run it until you run it in the ground, then take your profits and leave. No sense of long view. So it occurred to me yesterday, and I was building the fire because it's kind of cold here, and it occurred to me that Merton was a lot like Captain Kirk. You Star Trekkers will recognize that he was the original guy. William Shatner played him. He was the original guy in the Starship Enterprise, and so that just got me thinking. So I just started writing about it, and the poem came from there. So I'll give you the poem, and then we'll see. It's a poem about the long view. If you're a Trekkie, you'll like this maybe, or if you're a Tommy or a Merton. I've come to realize that Thomas Merton is the Captain Kirk of contemplation. I've come to realize that Thomas Merton is the Captain Kirk of contemplation. Most of us tend to aim for the goal instead of the journey. For Merton, like Kirk, it was always a journey of exploration. For Merton, like Kirk, it was always a journey of exploration. The wind in your sails can either be the Holy Spirit or the warp core. Yet the mission is always the same: to boldly go where no one has gone before. Ultimately, for both Merton and Kirk, we live our way into a new way of thinking. Ultimately, for Merton and Kirk, both of them, we live our way into a new way of thinking. All right, well, let's look at that for a little bit. Go back through it for a minute and make a few points here. Oops. There we go. Pull it up here. I call this the ongoing mission. It goes on and on. It's the ultimate long view. When you get into contemplation, and you get into space navigation, space travel, long view. And if there's anything wrong with the world today that threatens human survival, it's having this ultra short view. Oh, we can't afford it. We afford a lot of things. They don't take 1 minute to think about, the next hundreds of billions of dollars for war. But maybe we could have healthcare for everybody. Oh, well, we'd have to take it from something else. Well, they for the military budget, but they don't know. So we have the short view, not a long view. So, most of us tend to aim for the goal instead of the journey. Well, you cannot be a goal minded if you're going on the journey of contemplation, which is really what we're meeting to sort of learn about. There is no goal. There is no there is no time. This is if you're Buddhist or Christian or whatever. There is no time where you cross the goal line, you spike the football, and you're enlightened. The Dalai Lama talks about it. The Dalai Lama said there is no such thing as enlightenment. There's only enlightening. He's talking about a verbal here. It's a verb. There is no, so there, we'd all love, it was really shattering when I came to that point where I realized there was no goal line, that it just went on. Long view, you see, long view. And so when you sit in contemplation which is really the heart of what the heart to heart is, we do the teaching and then we drop into the cave of the heart. We drop into the heart in silence. That's really the heart of the three meditations we do, because without that, it just would degenerate into talk, 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 you see. So the silence in the very center is intentional in what we do. And so there's no goal. There's a journey. Except for Merton, like Kirk, it's always a journey of exploration. I can say that honestly with 50 years of this, sitting still and letting everything go, dropping down, letting go of thought. It's a journey of exploration. You're exploring. You're exploring inner space. You're exploring who you really are. The guy who started this, long gone, long gone. The guy to come, the true self, still looking for him. Still exploring, still catching glimpses. Okay, so get that. It's a journey of exploration. And then the image of the wind in your sails can either be the Holy Spirit. You could say the Buddha nature if you're coming from a Buddhist perspective, or the warp core. That's what actually. You could get into. I could talk for the rest of the time on what the warp core was, and then for your Star Trek guys, you know about that. It could be either one of those things, but catching the wind, it's not us. No sailors. I mean, you could row across the Atlantic, but sailboat's much more fun and a lot less effort. But you got to catch the wind, and every once in a while. In this game, when we're catching the wind of what Christians would call the Holy Spirit, the holy breath, the holy wind, the wind dies down. And as a matter of fact, for those sailors that were going across the Atlantic to the New World, there was a thing called the horse latitudes or the doldrums, certain places where the wind could die for days. There's just nothing. Calm as glass, not a puff of wind. And they had to stay ready. So this is very much like Advent. You have to stay ready and you have to show up. They have to be on deck. They have to be ready to trim the sails, turn it this way. And that's what catch the puff of wind. Any sailor knows that. And guys could die, out there. And one of the meanings of the horse latitudes, these doldrums, it's about 30 degrees north or south of the equator is the rough place for. There are other places in the Pacific, especially where they're just it's high pressure areas, no wind. But one of the nicknames of the thing was because they would, if they're traveling, bringing horses from Spain or something to the New World, which is where the horses came from in America. They're pretty heavy. They throw them overboard. They throw cargo overboard to lighten the ship so that the least puff of wind. And so it's this idea of emptying the cup. Well, they even had it in sailing. They said, we got to be as light as possible to catch this wind. And you had to be awake. Nobody was dozing there. You had to be awake, the least a bit of, the guys on deck would call them all to it. So you got to show up and you got to be ready. It's an interesting image. So no matter what it is, the mission's always the same. and this comes straight out of Star Trek, to boldly go where no one has gone before. And that would be a description of every time you sit in meditation or contemplation, to boldly go where no one has gone before, because it's never a repeat. If it is a repeat, you're managing it. If you say, well, it's always the same thing, I just sit and it's a bunch of thinking and I get frustrated and then the bell rings and that's it. Well, if that's it, if you're experiencing same old shit different day with your sitting practice, you're trying to manage it, because it's never the same. Never the same. You might have to go through dry periods. As a matter of fact, when everything else failed in an ocean voyage, they always had longboats on these big galleons, these four masters, and they for going ashore, when they had a port, they didn't really have long docks early on, and so they would get in the longboats, go ashore, bring stuff back and forth, and all that. So they would hook the longboats to the front of this big four-masted galleon, and they'd row, and they'd pull it until maybe they could catch the wind. Maybe they'd pull out of the things, and that's also part of that kind of lore. And it is, I'm not going to kid you, it's a lot like that sometimes. No wind. But when you show up for this exploration, and that's the equivalent of being at the oars, you show up. You can't catch the wind if you don't show up, you say. To boldly go where no one has gone before. I've been sitting almost every day for 50 years, but I got to have that attitude that I'm going into something that's absolutely new. That's the beginner's mind. That the first guy who taught me about this, Suzuki, he said, that's what it really means to have an empty mind. Empty it of all expectations. Yeah, I know what I'm going to find. No, I never know. Empty that out right there, that you have any idea. In a couple of minutes, when we ring the bell and say a few words, and then we're in the silence, you're on the ocean there. You're in the deep ocean, and you don't know what's going to happen. The mind will try to manage it. You cannot manage contemplation. You can't manage a sea journey. You can't manage God. If you do, you only have a manageable God. You only have something you can think about. But this is wild. This is as wild as it was, those guys crossing the Atlantic and sailing around the world where they didn't really know where they were going. It's the same. That's a good feeling to have. Don't think, somehow there's something wrong with you if you're flying by the seat of your pants. I'm still flying by the seat of my pants, and I feel that's the best attitude to have. Kirk goes out there, from the bridge. He says, just take it out there. We don't know what we're going to go to. That's a good attitude. Now, the last thing I say, ultimately, for both Merton and Kirk, and this is, I think, important, we live our way into a new way of thinking. It's not the other way around. You can't think your way into a new way of living. We all try it. We're going to make a resolution here in a month, and we're going to say, all right, I'm going to, do whatever. We make these resolutions, and that's not bad, but it doesn't quite work. It's the other way. We live our way into a new way of thinking. That's what a contemplative life is. And the living means you experience. It's got to start with experience. It's the difference between Captain Kirk and Spock, if you're a Trekkie. Spock is, he's a Vulcan who he's totally rational. And in certain crunch moments, Spock has one idea, but Kirk is he does something else. See, Spock said we can't do this because of X, Y, Z. He's the pure mind. I mean, later when you get into Spock actually learns a little bit, but most of the time Spock is just the stand-in for the totally rational mind. I'm going to think my way in a new way of living. That's why it never happens, really. That's why the 12 steps, there's steps, concrete, you see. and there's somebody bigger in charge than the rational mind. It's humbling to really admit that there's somebody else in charge. God is not my co-pilot. If anything, I'm God's co-pilot. You see, there's somebody else. So, but it starts with experience. So that's also something when the words stop and the bell rings, we go into silence. This is very, you know, you only become a sailor by going out on the sea. And you only actually become an explorer of inner space, ultimately to find out who you are. Merton said, if you find out who you really are, you'll find out who God really is, or vice versa. Well, that's interesting. Is it true? Well, there's only one way to find out. That's the beauty of it. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So, there are things you can do. Going back to our original screensaver that we said, you can, it's not, you're just not at the whim of fate or something like that, like the Greeks thought. No, you can learn how to trim your sails. There's another thing I could have put up there too, wasn't quite as contemplative, but I once saw a poster with the Maharishi uh, is sitting, standing in the tree posture where he's got one leg up and one leg on a surfboard coming down a huge wave. I saw it in Colorado at a ski shop. I should have bought it. And then underneath it says, you can't control the waves, but you can learn to surf. I mean, you just cannot control life. And but there's the experience. You can learn how to surf. You can learn how to trim your sail. So there's practical things we talk about too, in terms of this trip, which we can help one another with. But in the end, the wave is the energy. In the end, the wind is the energy. You see, there's something bigger than you and me moving it all. That's why that sentence that I like so much, be still and trust the love that moves the stars. There's some force moving everything, and you're trying to be still enough and be trusting enough to follow it, whatever it is, in this given moment. So I think that's enough for the talk. Let's actually set out to sea here.